What's up, running out the clock listeners? I am Chandler, your faithful. I don't know what we are, but I'm faithful. Whatever. I would like to welcome you to the first ever edition of a Welcome to the Tad Pod, which is both the opening line of the podcast and the name of the show. Here's the thing. I had an idea of doing an Ole Miss basketball centered podcast. I was gonna get that started probably next season because I thought this season was gonna kind of be a wash. I didn't really think a whole lot was gonna happen. I thought it would be kind of one of those years that it'd be a rocky start, and then maybe at the end of the season you're kind of looking and thinking, there's really something to this Kermit Davis. This team is starting to pull together. Maybe if things fall just right, they end up in the NIT, and that's a big step for the program. But as today stands, Ole Miss sits 3-0 in the SEC. They are currently ranked number 18 in the nation, and some bracketologists have them as high as a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. So what in the world is going on? So the other reason I was going to go ahead and start is that this night, I had available to me the foremost expert on Ole Miss basketball, Keith Harkin. Say hello, Keith.
Hello. I am your local Ole Miss basketball expert.
And when you have someone as knowledgeable and passionate about Ole Miss basketball as Keith Harkins, you jump in and do the show. That's what you do. For real, though, I've got a couple of Ole Miss buddies lined up that are willing to do a few episodes with me. So it may be me and Keith. It may be me and some of these buddies. It may be me, Keith, and some of these buddies. It may just be me. Who knows? But I'm going to try to get on here and talk at least once a week, kind of give you an update and some thoughts on the week that was in Ole Miss basketball, and what a week it was. But we'll come back to that. We're going to start off with actually a little bit of football. As you well know, the bowl season has wrapped. College football is over. We're awaiting the NFL conference championships, which should be unbelievable games coming up this weekend. But Keith, what are your thoughts on the season that was? Kind of maybe a highlight or two from bowl season, and I don't know, go with that for a second.
The season was, I think, kind of a lot of fun. You had some teams that kind of showed out, especially teams like Kentucky, who did not have their as normally scheduled midseason collapse that we're also fond of here at Running Out the Clock. So good for them. And then, of course, Florida had a much better season than I think they were, even than they were anticipating. Alabama was Alabama for almost the whole year. And that's where I want to throw this. Because the highlight of the season, and if you're an Alabama fan, I'm sorry to trigger your PTSD from this, but that national championship was hilarious and a lot of fun to watch for every possible reason that you could think of. If you are quite honestly tired of the Crimson Tide's football dominance, it's not a situation of us, hating good teams. It's just a situation of us kind of getting bored with college football as it is, because it's, life is you're born, you die, you pay taxes, and Alabama's good at football while Nick Saban's there. So it's just, it's not even a situation where they're fun to watch. I mean, Tua was fun, but outside of that, they were classic Bama. They were just kind of a machine. And then they roll into the national championship game and they get out Alabama'd by Clemson. Clemson did exactly what Alabama has been doing to people all year and looked more dominant and more efficient while doing so. And that was awesome.
Yeah, I liken this football season to a John Cena feud in WWE. See, what happens is you have John Cena, who obviously is Alabama. He's the face of the company. He's everything that represents pro wrestling, all that kind of stuff. And you get a plucky upstart maybe a CM Punk, and he's popular kind of underground. He's building ground support. He's building support that way, and then all of a sudden you get to say Money in the Bank 2011. Everybody expects Cena to win, and all of a sudden Punk comes out and wins the match. Or in the event of this particular national championship, it's more like that SummerSlam match with Brock Lesnar and John Cena, where you thought it was going to be a great match, and Cena would probably win it at the end. And Brock Lesnar just German suplexed him 25 times and beat him in about 30 seconds, because that's what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
We heard, and I don't know how much of this came out on the Running Out the Clock podcast throughout the season, because we weren't really talking about Clemson a whole lot, because we do tend to focus on SEC football for the most part. But I've had a huge crush on Trevor Lawrence for the whole season, and not because he looks like a girl. But I've thought, man, like this guy's unbelievable. Some of the Rivals guys before the season were talking about him, and I think one guy went so far as to say the two best high school prospects he'd ever seen, I think, were Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, and that Trevor Lawrence deserved to be mentioned with those two guys. And you thought, wow, that's hyperbole, that's crazy talk. And there's no way you can put him on that level coming out of high school. But I mean, he did some stuff, and Tua was great. Tua was great all year long. And Tua very much has that look of a great college quarterback. But Trevor Lawrence, as a freshman, was making throws and moving around in the pocket. There was one play, and I don't know. I mean, this might not mean anything if you know more about quarterbacks than I do, which is basically anybody, because I don't know anything about quarterbacks. But there was a play in the game where the pocket kind of broke down, and whereas like in the college game, you see quarterbacks, that's kind of when the pocket breaks down and they look to run. And I mean, that's a great tool to have, and that's fun to watch. But Lawrence, instead of running, he just takes 3 steps up in the pocket, finds his man, and just throws a laser. And I think it was a fairly inconsequential play. I mean, it was a long pass, maybe 20 yards or so, but it wasn't like a touchdown. It wasn't. I don't think it was like a key third down conversion or anything. It just was. He just stepped up in the pocket, stayed calm, made a great throw. And I love great quarterback play, and I think watching Trevor Lawrence the next 2 years is going to be a lot of fun. I wish he could. He's a lot like Zion Williamson in that. I mean, he probably could be in the NFL right now. Zion Williamson could be in the NFL or in the NBA, whichever one he chose to be, because they don't make people like that. But but anyway, I'm fascinated now because what we've seen in the aftermath of the championship for Alabama is seemingly an entire offensive staff turning over. And so you wonder, what does that do to their continuity for next season? I mean, obviously, they're still going to be uber talented. They're still going to be probably top to bottom the most talented team. But is the change in coaching staff, is that going to hurt them? Because you see just some kind of different schemes and different things going on. So, I mean, who knows what happens now? I mean, but the Clemson game definitely, I think, threw a monkey wrench into the narrative for a lot of people, because I think that people thought, oh, here's Clemson who's good, but they're not on Alabama's level. And maybe after the season, we're like, you know what? They weren't on Alabama's level because they were on a better level.
Right. They somehow achieved a higher
and let's also not overlook the fact that probably at the end of the year when you look, maybe the SEC just wasn't that good. I mean, maybe it was Alabama and a bunch of okay teams and nobody out there, Georgia almost beat them in the SEC championship. Kirby Smart said nobody wanted to play Georgia. Shut up.
Yeah. And then Georgia got rocked by Texas.
Georgia gets rocked by Texas,
I mean, look, whenever Florida finishes as the second highest ranked SEC team, not a huge bash against them because they're a talented team, but these are the exact same kids who went 4 and a million last year. But like, I think one of the most impressive things about Trevor Lawrence in that in that national championship game was he started out not having a great start to the game. He had some really bad passes where he just overthrew like wide open people. And I'm not even talking about like overthrew deep balls where that happens even with the best quarterbacks, but just wide receivers out in the flats threw it 10 yards over him. He had a weird release. It definitely looked like like the nerves were getting to him, and then he kind of settled in and did not look like a freshman ever again the entire game. It was as impressive of a performance by any quarterback as I think I've seen in a national championship game. It was kind of a weird start. Like it looked like this might be a race to 60 in the game because I think there were 4 touchdowns scored total just in the first, I think, 5 minutes of the game. And then that was basically it for Alabama as Clemson just took over and didn't really take their foot off the gas. So,
and it's one of those things. It's one of those things that's fascinating. It's did Alabama sit around and kind of read their own press clippings for the whole season? I mean, because really, again, nobody really challenged them all year. I think the best game they played was Mississippi State, and they were just so inept on offense that it didn't really matter. But I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens next year. Certainly, Alabama is probably going to be number 1 again. Clemson will be number 2, and you look and you think that they probably both run the table again because I don't know that anybody.
The ACC is bad.
Yeah.
When your ACC championship opponent is Pitt.
Yeah. So we'll see. But like we said, football season is now over, and we are well into SEC play now in college basketball. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to look with. With basketball, in the preseason, in the non-conference, because you just don't know. A lot of times, you just don't know what you're looking at. But we're 3 games in to the SEC. It looks like everybody's played. A handful of teams have only played 2 games, but just about everybody's played 3 games. A handful of teams have only played 2, and the standings are pretty surprising. Not necessarily with who's in the number 1 spot, because that's Tennessee, and I think going into the season, a lot of people thought Tennessee was going to be one of the better teams, not just in the SEC, but in the entire country. But maybe more surprising are who rounds out the top 3, because before the season, Ole Miss was picked to finish last in the SEC. I believe South Carolina was picked to finish 13th in the SEC. And currently sitting at number 2 in the SEC is Ole Miss at 3-0 with a win streak of 10 games. And South Carolina also at 3-0, whose overall record is 8-7, but coming off of a really strong start to SEC play. And seeing as this is a show that is going to be primarily about Ole Miss basketball, let's talk about Ole Miss basketball. And I'll throw Keith a bone here real quick. Florida is currently sitting at 1-2 and 9-6 overall. So a little bit of a disappointing start for Florida, but I haven't really gotten the chance to see them very much. They'll be playing tomorrow night against Mississippi State at Mississippi State, who will be looking to rebound from an 0-2 start. And we'll talk a little bit about the Mississippi State Ole Miss game here in just a second. But here's the thing. Whether you watch a lot of college basketball or not, anytime you see a team that finishes last in the conference one year, or maybe they might have been 13th in the conference last year, you see a team that finishes either last or next to last, they bring the exact same team is back the next season, and they're picked to finish last. It is a head scratcher when they end up starting off league play 3-0 with wins over 2 top 15 teams, 1 on the road, beat another, I think, pretty good Vanderbilt team at Vanderbilt, really with the same players. And they find themselves this week sitting at number 18 in the AP poll. More importantly, they're sitting at number 24 in the NCAA evaluation tool, which is the main metric that the selection committee will be using going forward. And so, I mean, Keith, even without knowing the particulars of Ole Miss basketball, I mean, what do you think when you hear something? And there's still 15 conference games left to play, but what do you think about when you hear something like that about a 3-0 start, 2 top 15 wins, a 10-game winning streak? What comes to your mind for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I talk basically every day about a variety of subjects, or just subjects, but
build the wall.
Yeah, something that comes up every once in a while is just, especially with the way that the football season kind of unraveled. You were ready to break out the basketballs in October, and I think talking to you a little bit about Ole Miss basketball, you were excited to watch that. I think you thought that, like, they would be a fun team to watch, even though they were going to be a potentially unsuccessful team just in the win-loss columns, but that you could see some player development happen, and then hopefully kind of going into the end of the year, see some wins kind of start to pile up and just kind of see where they go. And so it's kind of been the opposite of that for them here, where they've reeled off a 10-game win streak, and of course, as you said, beating two top 15 teams, one on the road. Maybe more importantly is that road win was against State, of course, the heated in-state rival of Ole Miss, and it's more impressive, I think, that Ole Miss is in that second spot than it is like a team like South Carolina, who's in that third spot in the SEC, just because, they've won 3 games against conference opponents, but their overall record's not super impressive. So, as they get into the meat of their conference, you look for them to kind of fall back down to earth a little bit. But with Ole Miss here having 2 early wins against top 15 teams, and listening to you and Joseph kind of talk about the games a little bit, it seems like Ole Miss really I think showed some character in the game against Auburn, because they were down and Auburn looked like they were going to go on a run, and Ole Miss kind of put a stop to that and went on a good run themselves and kind of took the game over. So for a young team to kind of show that poise, that's good for them, and I think it bodes well for the future of the season for them.
For sure. And the thing that I keep coming back to with Ole Miss basketball right now is that this is probably the least talented, or least, I don't know, the worst fit of a roster that Kermit Davis is going to have, because it's his first year. It's mostly guys that he's inherited. Now, Andy Kennedy left some very, very good guards. I mean, right now the team is being led and held together by Terrence Davis and Breon Tyree and Devontae Shuler, all 3 guards who Kennedy had recruited and Kennedy had on the court. But you're getting an unbelievable level of play out of all 3 of those guys right now. I mean, Davis kind of gets the headlines because he's the senior, and he's had a couple of he had a 30-point game against Butler on the road early, which was a game that Ole Miss lost, I think, only by about 5 points. 5 or 7 points, which that was the second game of the year. So you kind of looked at that game and thought, like you could kind of see that maybe if some things start to bounce right, that maybe this won't be the year that we think it's going to be. But so he had 30 against Butler, he had 31 against Auburn. Breon Tyree, who is playing more of a 2-guard this year than a point guard. He's had a couple of big games. He's had some 25 and 28-point games. And then Devontae Shuler, who's playing point guard, he went for I think 24, 25 against Cincinnati, even in that loss. So you've seen those three guards really really shine, I think, in the offense that Kermit Davis run, which is a big difference from Andy Kennedy's offense, who Andy would just kind of find the guy with the hot hand and just ride him until he was, that's where guys like Marshall Henderson would be really, really beneficial for Ole Miss, because, I thought about calling this podcast Toxic Marshalllinity, but I decided not to. But you would have a guy like Marshall Henderson who would go, like, he hit 7 threes in a game, but he would take 31. He'd be 7 for 31 in a game. Now, those 7 would come at a key moment, and they would all come in a row. But you were just getting high volume shooters and guys who would score. Well, the amazing thing about this season is that Breon Tyree has been scoring very, very efficiently. Breon Tyree scoring a lot in the last 2 seasons is not an uncommon thing, but Breon Tyree scoring 22 points on 9 for 11 or 12 for 14 shooting. That's what's different, and that's what's so amazing. And the staple, Kermit Davis's staple at Middle Tennessee, was for so long running the 1-3-1 zone, and really kind of really frustrating teams on defense. Ole Miss is not doing that yet. The defense is better. There's been marked improvement, but this is not a team that's winning games with defense yet. And so as Kermit continues to build the roster and build the team, he's going to get guys that can defend and score in his system. And look, if he's going to do damage with this team, because going back to what we were talking about with preseason expectations, you had, coming into the SEC season, you had what I kind of consider the tier 1 teams in the conference, which are Tennessee, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Kentucky. Those 4 teams, kind of based off of last year, Tennessee and Auburn were co-champs last year. They brought basically everybody back. Kentucky is Kentucky. They're going to do what they do. And Mississippi State is a very talented and very experienced team. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, the Ole Miss Mississippi State game in just a second. But based on my eye, which pays a little bit more attention to basketball than your normal Southern sports fan, are a very talented team that's trying to figure out some personnel issues right now that they're not clicking as a team. But their talent's undeniable, and I think they're fairly well coached. And so you had those 4 teams, and then you had a bunch of other pretty good teams, but nobody that really jumped off the page. Like LSU's got a ton of talent. They're not well coached. Vanderbilt has a couple of maybe lottery picks, but one of them got hurt in the non-conference play, so that's a big setback. Missouri lost Jonte Porter before the season began, and that's a big hit. So you have all the other teams that are kind of like, we don't know who they are, we don't know what they're going to be. But again, like we said with Ole Miss, that if you looked at this season and going in, I looked at it and thought, you know what, if we can win 18 games, maybe pull off an upset late in the season, maybe you get a big win over Kentucky on senior night to kind of launch you into the conversation surrounding the NIT. Maybe be an NIT bubble team and get there. But to go from that expectation to looking after the Cincinnati game, and you realize, okay, like, these are our weaknesses. Those aren't really going to get fixed this season. So let's just see what we can do, to reeling off. Coming into SEC play, reeling off 7 wins in a row, and then you get that win against Vanderbilt on the road, and you're like, okay, like this is something that's really interesting, because the first 3 games, you open at Vanderbilt, you're at home against Auburn, who's number 11, and then you're on the road at Mississippi State, who's number 14. You're just praying at that point that you don't go 0-3 in that stretch, because you could go 0-3 and still be a better basketball team than you were last year, but go 0-3, and your postseason hopes are, however slim they might have been going into the conference play, they're pretty much dashed. so you win that Vanderbilt game, and you're like, man, like that's great. If we could just split the next two, and then you win the Auburn game, and you're like, man, that's awesome. Like we get a free shot Saturday against State, and then you go into Starkville and you beat State, which I don't mean for this to be trash talk or rubbing it in, but Ole Miss has actually won 9 of the last 11 against Mississippi State, which is a pretty unbelievable statistic when you consider the rough year they had last year and just the perceptions of the program. Mississippi State is in their minds, and I mean honestly in the national conversation as well. Mississippi State is kind of the basketball program in Mississippi, and like I said, Ole Miss has won 9 of the last 11, which is an unreal statistic because several of those games include winning in Starkville. So
is that just a coaching issue, or what do you think can attribute most of that happening?
A couple of different things. I mean, I think that Mississippi State made a terrible coaching hire when they went with Rick Ray, and this goes way back several years. And when Ben Howland took over, and Ben Howland is a proven and very, very good coach, but when Ben Howland took over, he just didn't have a lot to work with, and so Ole Miss was kind of at the height of the Kennedy era during those times. So they made a couple of NCAA tournaments. They won the SEC tournament one of those years, and they just at that point Ole Miss just was better. They had better players. They had better coaching, and but eventually you saw State start to build the talent up and the coaching to go with it, and all of a sudden it looked like after last season State won really, really big in Starkville. And the conversation around the programs was just completely different because State was moving in a good direction. Ole Miss was moving in a not good direction. And so you kind of thought that this might be the kickoff of another big run. But the thing that's really stood out to me about Ole Miss so far this season is the way that it seems like every game a different player has stepped up and had a massive game. And what I mean by that is when you go back to the Vanderbilt game, let me pull up the numbers on this, but when you go back to the Ole Miss Vanderbilt game, Terrence Davis, who is more or less, I mean, he's the star of the team. He's the name. He's the marketable guy. Terrence Davis did not have a good game against Vanderbilt. Let me find the numbers here, but Terrence Davis finished with, here's the box score. Now, see, on a well-oiled machine podcast, we would have already had these numbers up, but that's not what we are tonight. Terrence Davis only scored 11 points against Vanderbilt. He got in foul trouble early and just couldn't ever really get it going. So you would think that on a night like that, where your star is not having a great game, then that you would struggle, especially on the road. Well, what does Breon Tyree do? Breon Tyree scores 31 points on 11 of 16 shooting, and so you've got that, and so then you go into the Auburn game, and you could see very early on in the Auburn game, Auburn decided they were not going to let Tyree beat them. They just weren't going to let him do it, and so they completely take Tyree out of the game. He only scores like 5 points, and it's kind of a frustrating night for him. So what happens? Terrence Davis scores 31 points. Davis bounces back, and all of a sudden Davis bounces back, and he's having the great game that you've been looking for him to have. And then they go to Starkville. And Davis and Tyree. Tyree goes down like 1 minute into the game. It was a hard screen. It was a perfectly legal, great basketball play. But Tyree gets screened hard. He goes down, hurts his shoulder, and so you're kind of like, well, that's not good. And he didn't have a bad game. Tyree finished with 19 points. Davis finished with 12, and so those are good numbers. But what happens? The freshman Blake Henson scores 26 points. which featured a run in the second half when Ole Miss was kind of struggling with momentum a little bit, where Henson comes down 3 straight trips and hits three 3-pointers in a row, and it's like, and it was funny. I think it really bothered Joseph and Rowe, because after Henson hit one of the threes, he turned around to the state student section and did this weird shimmy jump step and walk back down. Everybody started booing him and stuff, and it was like, so if you're listening, why don't you shimmy on over to your podcast app and subscribe to Running Out the Clock, make like Blake Henson and shimmy on out of here. But yeah, it's the way that different people have stepped up and answered the bell every single time. And so even though Ole Miss is not a deep team, I mean, if Tyree's injury were to have been one that were to have kept him out for a long time, or if Ole Miss gets to a point where a Schuler or a Davis or a Tyree rolls an ankle and has to miss 2 or 3 games, they can't recover from that. So while it's not a deep team, it is a team that can get scoring and can get what it needs from a bunch of different places. And so that's to me, that's a sign of really good coaching, and it's a sign of a team that really trusts each other and likes each other, which I think when you look around college sports, sometimes you can see that these guys, they're talented. They just don't play well together. They don't like each other, however that might work out.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the games here, some of the box scores, and it doesn't look like they're, on average getting a whole lot of help off the bench. But looking at this Auburn game, pretty impressive that KJ Buffin comes off the bench. He gets 16 points, and no doubt that kind of helped them, solve Auburn's run and kind of put Ole Miss back ahead. So good for him.
Yeah, and KJ Buffin is another great story on this team. KJ Buffin was committed. He actually signed with Middle Tennessee while Kermit Davis was still there, and then when Kermit took the Ole Miss job, he requested his release and came to Ole Miss with Kermit Davis. So KJ Buffin is a freshman, and Blake Henson is a freshman. And Blake Henson actually graduated a year early. So Blake Henson should actually be a senior in high school this year. And so when you look at the games these guys have had and you see the way, I think Henson is the more mature player. Henson's the more polished player right now. But when you listen to Kermit talk in interviews or whatever, or apparently just what he kind of tells people off the record, which I'm obviously not one of those people, but podcasts and things of people that are those people, they say that he thinks that Buffin is an NBA player for sure, and that once he kind of gets up to 235 pounds, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. So you're getting good production out of your freshmen, and then the other key is Dominik Olejniczak, the center, who is from Poland. He's 7 feet tall, and last year you looked at him and you thought that guy cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, he was. I don't like the dog players. I don't like to call guys out by name, especially when they play for my own team. But I mean, Dom was bad last year. I mean, he really was. There's no way around it. But this year, it's unbelievable. It's like he's a totally different player. I mean, he's developed a really, really nice baby hook shot. He's not a guy. It's frustrating. He's not a guy that at 7 feet is going to go and get you a bunch of rebounds, but he is a force around the rim, and he kind of I don't know if the stats bear this out, but it seems like he does a good job on his man in the paint so that other guys can get rebounds. So, whatever it is that's working, it's working, and he's become a very valuable member for the team. So it's been a crazy surprise, and even I, who for as negative as I am about football and as pessimistic as I am about that, I can get pretty optimistic and drink the Kool-Aid pretty hard with basketball. And and so I can always kind of find positives in things when it comes to Ole Miss basketball. But even I didn't see this coming. I mean, I called my dad after the game when I was driving back from Starkville. I called my dad and I was just like, I don't know what I'm watching. Because it's just so out of the blue. And you know, I was sitting there with I was sitting there at the game watching it with a good friend of mine who's a state guy, and we were talking about each other's teams. And Bruce Stevens, our backup center, got in the game, and Bruce Stevens is infuriating because instead of attacking the basket, he does the pick and pop where he goes out to the 3-point line and shoots threes and misses all of them. And so I'm telling my friend, I'm like, yeah, he's going to shoot a bunch of threes. He's going to miss all of them. As soon as he does it, he hits a three. And then the next trip down, he does it again, hits another three, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then he gets a technical for taunting the state bench, and they made the free throws. The second three was basically negated. So
right,
so you
kind of wiped it out. Yeah,
you want to kind of keep your emotions in check a little bit more, but you know, to go to start one win, and like that crowd was hostile. That crowd was loud. I mean, it was a great environment. It was a great atmosphere. It was intense. They were engaged. But, you know, one of my favorite things is when you're the visiting team and you're in a loud, intense gym, and then it just goes silent. And, you know, when Devontae Shuler got that last rebound with about 5 seconds left and the crowd just went silent, you were like, yeah, this is awesome. This is what it's all about. And, yeah, so, you know, it changes the outcome. I mean, it feels weird. It feels really weird after the last several years to look and to say, okay, at this point in the season, assuming nobody gets injured, not making the NCAA tournament is a disappointment for Ole Miss basketball. And I don't know that there's ever been a year. I don't know that there's ever been a year that you can honestly say that. I don't know that there's ever been a year where you look at them and think, yeah, they really should be there. I think 2013, the Marshall Henderson year, I think you kind of thought that year was probably a you should be there moment. But other than that, you just don't get that a lot with this program. And so for Kermit Davis to have it like this in year one with a team that he mostly did not build, and knowing he's going to build a team that's going to more reflect what he wants to do, especially on defense, it's pretty unbelievable. And you know, there's 15 more conference games to play. Very easy to roll an ankle or mess up a shoulder for a few games, and that can obviously throw some things off because the team is razor thin in depth. But I don't know, man. It's going to be crazy, and it's going to be. I know that probably by the time people listen to this, it's already going to be outdated because Ole Miss plays LSU tomorrow night at 8:00 in the Pavilion, which is going to be another good chance for a quality win. And then they play Arkansas on Saturday, which will be here on Welcome to the Tad Pad. Hopefully Sunday night, recapping those games. So tune in then. You know, make like Blake Henson and shimmy right back over here to listen to what we're talking about. But it's going to be another big week, but it's going to be a week where the expectations for the season have completely changed. I mean, this time, I guess with it being Monday, we were already kind of well into it. But the last Saturday to Saturday stretch we had, I mean, you went from maybe this team could be an NIT team to if this thing falls right, you could get the double bye in the SEC tournament and be a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that, I mean, even the most optimistic people that I know didn't think that was something that was possible. And so here we are. So I don't know, man. It's going to be fun. And I don't know. You got any more thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's so you know, there's a couple of moments in the upcoming schedule where it looks like it could potentially get rough. You know, you go to Florida, turn around and you host State again. A few weeks later, you got Auburn on the road, and then South Carolina on the road, and then you wrap up the season against Tennessee at home, at Arkansas, and then you have Kentucky at home. So is this a situation where you think maybe kind of how the season's gone so far, if if it kind of regresses to where you thought it would be, is it still a successful season because of like the aggregate, or is it a disappointment because of where it was versus where it could end up? You know what I'm saying?
I think it can be a little bit of both because it can be a little bit of both because you showed, look, Kermit Davis has shown like what to expect from Ole Miss basketball in the years to come.
Right.
Because once he gets his guys, he gets his roster built, then you're going to be able to hang with these teams. You're going to have, if not necessarily equal talent, you're going to be a well-coached and well-disciplined team. But you look at the game against LSU coming up tomorrow night. Ole Miss is favored by 5 points, which is about what you would expect in that game. I would have pegged it maybe a little bit higher, like maybe 6 or 7. But you get through these next 2 games, and I mean at that point the sky's kind of the limit because look, you're not going to go. Well, Tennessee's probably not even going to go 18-0 in the league.
Right.
That's probably not going to happen. But if you get through this week 4-1, then you're looking at a number like 11-7 in the conference or 12-6 being very reasonable, a very reasonable goal. And you also have that big Iowa State game and the SEC Big 12 Challenge looming on the 26th. And the other thing too is that with the exception of Tennessee coming to Oxford, Ole Miss is going to be favored in every home game that they have the rest of the way. Assuming they stay healthy. But I mean, college basketball is all about winning at home. Mm-hmm. You've already got 2 big road wins, so just don't slip up against somebody that you shouldn't slip up against, and you're good. I mean, you're set. Because you're a better coach team than LSU. You're a better team than Arkansas. They come to Alabama on the 22nd. They're better than Alabama, and so just don't come out and beat yourselves. And you're gonna have a game like a Florida or you got to go to Georgia, which that would be a bad loss, but it's at Georgia, which is always a tough place to play. I mean, South Carolina, Frank Martin's an unbelievable coach. Mm-hmm. So you've got games on your schedule that are going to be problematic because that's just the way that league play goes for everybody. But it's the other reason that everything feels so confident, I guess, is because they've done what they've done just night in and night out. Mm-hmm. They haven't made a bunch of stupid mistakes. They haven't. And even in the 2 games that they lost, they haven't beaten themselves at all. And right. so I think that's where I think that because I think that I mean, again, take the Ole Miss Mississippi State game from Saturday. I think Ole Miss won the game, but I think in some ways you can say that State kind of beat themselves because there were times where they would just like be a tight game. They would go, they'd make a careless mistake, or they would shoot a 32-foot 3-pointer with 27 seconds left on the shot clock. And, that's not recipes to win. But Ole Miss, every game they've played, they've stayed very calm. They haven't taken bad shots. They haven't made a bunch of stupid turnovers. And so I think that's going to continue to translate because at some point, you do it 1 game, then you did a good job. You do it 2 games. Okay. You do it 15 games. Like you're kind of noticing a pattern at that point. And so I think being led by Davis and Tyree, these experienced guards, these great players. I mean, Tyree's currently, I think he's either 2nd or 3rd in the SEC in scoring. Ole Miss is leading the SEC in free throw percentage. So they're doing things very, very consistently that aren't things that teams typically kind of lose, halfway through the season. And the other thing is they seem like they really, really believe in each other. I know I've already mentioned they seem like they really enjoy playing together, but it really does. It does seem like you have on the game where Davis scores 31 points. Bree and Tyree's the first guy off the court to celebrate with him, and Tyree scores 31 points, and Davis is the first guy off the court. So there's no jealousy among the team. There's no animosity between players. Whereas other teams, you might have the guy that's kind of out to get his or whatever. So you just don't see any of that yet, and that's I think that's a big part of why there's so much optimism around the team right now, is because they've bought in so wholly and so completely to this concept of team basketball that, again, as much as I loved Andy Kennedy, that was not really his MO. He was a lot more. I mean, they ran sets, they ran plays, those kinds of things, but Kennedy was way more about kind of getting the hot guy the ball and just letting that go. And Kermit's all about, look, run the offense. You're going to get open shots. You're going to get good looks. When you get open looks, you get good shots. Take them. Do it. Take the best shots you can, but trust the offense and slow down and do that. And while I said their defense is not where it needs to be yet, the defense is feeding the offense in a lot of ways. And they switched to that 1-3-1, and teams just don't know what to do with it. Ole Miss just is not deep enough to run it the whole game yet. So it's going to be crazy, man. Like I said, as optimistic as I can be for Ole Miss basketball, I didn't see this coming at all. And so, they stay healthy. It's going to be an interesting ride.
Yep. Well, here's to hoping that they do stay healthy.
Yep. So, well, we'd like to thank everyone for listening to the first episode of Welcome to the Tad Pad, brought to you by Running Out the Clock Sports. I would remind you that I am Chandler. I was joined by my good friend and Ole Miss basketball connoisseur, Keith Harkins. Mm-hmm. We are, we're just glad to be on the internet talking about sports. So do us a favor. Make like Blake Henson and shimmy on over to wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to Running Out the Clock. You get tons of great content. You'll get this show. You'll get the show when the four of us get together, which who knows how often we'll do that. In the football off season, you'll get 40 Minutes of Hell. You'll get the Weekly Pessimist. You'll get Gator Rituals every now and then. Check it out. It's great. We have fun. Hope you have fun. And I will talk to you next time. And Keith might talk to you next time too. Keith is going to become an Ole Miss basketball fan by the time this thing is over.
Good chance.
Probably not, but he'll be here to talk. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time when we recap the week that was in Ole Miss basketball.
Stay tuned. God Friended Me is next.
Featuring young children.